History of Cambodia from 1970 to present days, divided into 4 sections, starting from the Khmer Republic period to the Democratic Cambodia period and the Republic of Cambodia period. We're going to start off with the Khmer Republic period from 1970 to 1975, led by Lozano and Prince Remata. How did it all started? On 1970, King Norodom Sihanouk had left Cambodia for medical treatment at France and then left for the Soviet Union. With this opportunity, Lozano and Prince Remata had led a bloodless coup in Phnom Penh. A new government was established on the 18th of March 1970. What negative effects did the war have on the country? Over 1 million Cambodians have died, got wounded, orphaned, and handicapped. Thousands became refugees and lost their families. 4 out of 5 industrial factories were destroyed, 2 out of 3 rubber plantations were lost, 70 to 80% of roads and railroads were destroyed, sea and river ports were badly damaged. Areas under control of the Khmer Republic did not make any agricultural or industrial progress. Cambodia had to import rice from other countries. Goods and supplies were overpriced, chaos was everywhere in the country, and finally, soldiers fell out of order and joined the enemy forces. Up next is the Democratic Cambodia period from 1975 to 1979. It all started when on the 17th of May 1975, the Khmer Rouge have captured Phnom Penh City and nearby provinces. They were led by the infamous Pol Pot. In order to evacuate people from the city, Pol Pot lied that the UNCA, or the organization, wanted to clean the city. The US wanted to drop bombs in the city and that the UNCA had no ways to transfer food and supplies into the city. The principles of the Khmer Rouge was to evacuate people from urban to rural areas in order to create an agricultural utopia, to eliminate the currency and money usage, to create a unified community by living, eating, and working together, to eliminate the class system, to kill all highly educated people, and to destroy pagodas and eliminate religion to make monks do farm work, and finally to chase out the Vietnamese from Cambodia. Life under Khmer Rouge was that people had to work 12 to 15 hours per day and only have 2 meals, which were mostly watery rice porridge. Anyone that is found out to have been an official of the last government or connected to it will be executed. Marriage was forced and people attended ceremonies which 2 people held hands together even if they were strangers, and they will be considered married. Connections between families were banned, and everyone has to refer to one another as comrade. Children are trained to kill, even their own families. Fall of the Khmer Rouge. There are 3 factors that led to the collapse of the Khmer Rouge. Firstly, the people's factor is obviously that people did not support the Khmer Rouge because they were living in hellish conditions. The purification factor is that the Khmer Rouge stopped trusting people in their own ranks, and they executed many of their own members. The most major one is war with Vietnam. On 2nd of December 1978, the United Front of National Salvation Cambodia, or the UFNSK, was created by Heng Samrin and alongside Vietnamese allies. They defeated Pol Pot's regime on 7th of January successfully after a long time of fighting. Finally, we have the People Republic of Cambodia from 1979 to 1993. The flag and country name changes within these years, but I'll just use this one to avoid any confusion. So there was this solidarity group of production that was formed to help widows, orphans, and elderly people to receive food because they're unable to farm. And the group was separated into 3 divisions of people according to their work potential. There was the medium, there was weak and strong. Cambodia's economy was mainly focused on agriculture. 90% of the citizens were farmers and peasants. Rice is staple food for the whole population. Rubber plantations were the main source of the country's exports to nearby countries, like Thailand. Fishing was also highly developed during these times, so things were getting back together. The important leaders, okay, so I don't know why this is so highlighted and important in my textbook, but it seems to be so. But yeah, the leaders of the last periods weren't even mentioned, so let's get to it. There's Heng Samrin, there's Pain Sovan, there's Hun Sen, and finally there's Yosim. 2 of these guys used to be prime ministers, and 2 of them passed away already. It's 2017, and
The economic issues in Cambodia.
One of the most prevalent economic issues in Cambodia involves their agricultural sector, because Cambodia's economy depends on agriculture. 85% of Cambodia's area cultivates to the production of rice, and some are from rubber trees. 80% of the Cambodians resides in rural areas, and almost 40% engage themselves to agricultural sectors. Their primary product is rice, and other significant commodities includes cassava, mung beans, maize, and soybean. being said that the government of Cambodia encouraged investment in agriculture. The expansion of the cultivated area caused agricultural growth, but because of this, profits per hectare grew at a lower rate due to the rising of production costs. Annual agricultural growth had dropped below 2% from 2013. Weak foundation, exceptionally constrained water system in rural areas, and inefficient access to innovation and expansion administrations are the real difficulties that Cambodian farmers face. Inadequate access to water is one of the major problems of the farmers. Some of them depends on the weather itself.
What are other economic issues in Cambodia?
Inflation is very rampant in Cambodia because inflation rate continues to rise every year. Inflation will continue to grow this year by 2.7% in the first quarter of the year, 2.5% in the second, 2.7% in the third, and 2.5% in the last quarter. The increase of global production and local agricultural commodities caused the inflation of the country. It is expected to rise by 3% faster than 2018's 2.5%. Cambodia continues to experience inflation because of the arousing of the imported goods in the country. The economic growth is in crisis, but the inflation continues to stabilize over the year. This crisis is a huge factor why poverty is relevant to the country, because the income of the poor remain constant while the price of the food and other necessities continues to rise.
How does Cambodia solve these issues?
Cambodia's inflation continues to arise, but central bank says that it is still manageable as long as it doesn't come up to 5%. The central bank also said that when the inflation reaches 0%, that's a real problem because it can affect the profit of the producers. NBC Governor Chea Chanto noted that the country's economy is expected to grow at 7% this year with a lower inflation rate and a stable US dollar-yen exchange rate. This growth is said to be a help to the importation of the goods and services internationally. Cambodia's economic growth rises. It helps inflation to be manageable because it drives garment import and tourism. Cambodia opens more opportunity for several investors. This can provide them with more advancement to their products because it is accessible to the market.
What are the actions of ASEAN regarding this issue?
ASEAN thinks that Cambodia is an attractive investment destination. Although providing more foreign goods to their country would raise inflation, this would also give more opportunities to them to develop their country more. Cambodia's relation with ASEAN helps in normalization of international connection to their country.
What is the solution to the issue?
As a solution to this problem, it is proven that Cambodia has the potential to be an agricultural exporter. But this may take time because of their prime minister who rejected the proposal with regards to the betterment of their agricultural production. To develop agriculture in Cambodia, the government isn't enough. They need participation from private sectors, NGOs, and developmental partners. A great solution to this issue is the innovation of their products, like how farmers produce fragrant rice, cassava turning into dried chips, and other things that can help them increase their income. The government in Cambodia's mission is to make their country a major rice exporter. But to be able to do this, they need to provide advanced technology to the country.
How does the ASEAN help in solving the issue?
The ASEAN aims to help countries like Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, and Cambodia with their agricultural needs. To be able to do this, they aim to help them with their water supply, and they also want to help with regards to the lowland areas and tropical agriculture.
In terms of social issues in Cambodia, there are three major parts that are affecting them. One is health, second, education, and last but not the least will be the employment. I would like to talk about their health. In terms of health in Cambodia, Cambodia has made impressive progress in the last few decades in fighting against HIV and AIDS and promoting effective family planning practices. Health is still an urgent issue facing the youth today. Social and cultural transformation brought about new risks for the health of Cambodia's youth. The major challenges are sexual and reproductive health issues, including STI and HIV and AIDS, unwanted pregnancy, pregnancy-related issues, unsafe abortion, mental health problems, accidents, and violence. Not only that, youth are also exposed to negative lifestyle like the use of alcohol, the use of drugs. Well, the level of alcohol consumption among Cambodians aged 15 to 19 is among the highest in ASEAN, while about 42% of males aged 15 to 19 are current drinkers. Illicit drug use is also an issue. According to the National Authority of Combating Drugs, 60% of drug users were aged 18 and 25 in 2010. Now, allow me to talk to you about the employment issues in Cambodia. As youth aged 15 to 29 years old comprise around 43% of the working age population in Cambodia, the labor force is still characterized by low education and skills. Decent work is still difficult to find for young people due to the dominance of the informal sector in the labor market. Even with the growth rates in the modern urban industries like garments, manufacturing, tourism, or construction sector, more than 2/3 of the young people are still working in the agricultural sector. Alright, for the last part of the social issues in Cambodia, is about education. Cambodia has made good progress over the 15 years. In 2014, the net enrollment rate in primary school was 98.4%. The primary school completion rate was 89.9%, and the literacy rate of people aged 15 to 24 years was 91%. However, many young people drop out of school, and access to secondary education shows high inequalities across gender, location, and social-economic groups, with a total secondary net enrollment rate of only 27.7%. In 2014, the dropout rate gets high when it comes to secondary education, reaching 21% in lower secondary in 2014. Although rural and poorest youth had an improved opportunity to enter higher grades, the rate of school enrollment is still low compared with urban and richest youth. Even though the higher education remains far beyond the reach of most rural and female youth, the gross enrollment rate in tertiary education among youth aged between 18 and 22 improved significantly over the last 10 years, from 4.9% to 20%, including for the poorest household from 0.2 to 2.6%, and for women 3.3 to 14.4%.
Cambodia is most known for having the world's largest religious building, which is the Angkor Wat. It is one of the main reasons why tourists visit Cambodia and is also considered as one of the wonders of the world. Despite Cambodia's beauty, it has underlying issues that concern the safety and welfare of the people. One of the main reasons why Cambodia had to strengthen their political security was because of the Khmer Rouge regime that occurred in 1975 to 1979. The Khmer Rouge was a brutal government that ruled Cambodia under the Marxist dictator Pol Pot. This period is also known as the Cambodian genocide because Pol Pot attempted to create a Cambodian master race through social engineering, which ultimately led to the death of more than 2 million people in the Southeast Asian country. Those killed were either executed as enemies of the regime or died from starvation, disease, or overwork.
In addition to that, Monica, first of all, I want to explain the timeline of when was Khmer Rouge happened. So first of all, there was a French colonization, and after French colonization, there was a war between Vietnam and America. First was Vietnam colonized Cambodia, and then when the Americans beat the Vietnamese, they started to expand in Cambodia. However, Pol Pot, one of the leaders of Khmer Rouge, decided to say, it's enough. We need to create a perfect government, like a perfect system that would change everything. So what they did was they tried to kill everyone. They changed everything. They killed everyone who opposed. They imprisoned people who were elitist, including doctors, lawyers, teachers, because they want to make their people same, the same, not equal, but the
Okay.
same, because their point, I mean, their objective was they wanted to they wanted to um, remove the thinking of
The people.
hierarchy.
Okay.
They didn't want to have a
So
hierarchy.
they wanted to eliminate the.
Yeah, they didn't want to eliminate.
Okay.
Yeah, and then they removed like the political party, like the president, vice president. That they just had workers, and then their education they also abolished it because they believed that education wasn't the key to success, but cooperation. That's it.
Ever since the CPP blueprint was established, the consolidation of the CPP power has developed the expansion of state, business, and military elites. Well-connected Cambodians have reaped the benefits of stability and growth. The army, for example, now has an estimated 3,000 generals, over 3 times more than the US Army. This has helped create new laws strengthening the government control of judiciary.
Okay, the laws were created were the laws in the organization of the courts, the study of judges. Wait, cut it.
Cut.
The laws created were the laws and organization of the courts, the study of judges and prosecutors, and the organization and functioning of the Supreme Council of the Magistracy had promoted the increase of government control over a politically subservient Supreme Council of the Magistracy and weakened provision for the judicial independence. The laws facilitated further encroachment by the government on areas properly reserved for the judiciary under the principle of separation of powers, including government control over the judiciary's budgetary finance and administrative matters, restriction on the rights of judges and prosecutors' freedom of expression, and fewer safeguards for judicial independence in selection, promotion, removal, and disciplinary procedures for judges. So therefore, the legislation Therefore, the legislation put the Minister of Justice as the main and final key of all the decision making by the judiciary and the Supreme Council of the Magistracy, in which the legislation put the Minister of Justice as the main and final key of all the decision making by the judiciary and the Supreme Council of the Magistracy, in which it will be charged with appointing, disciplining, and overseeing the country's judicial system.
We didn't come to Cambodia to talk about the genocide. We came here to talk about the country, the past and present alike. But to truly explain the backdrop of modern Cambodia, it's just something we can't ignore. Let's look at the Khmer Rouge. But before we get into today's story, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's watched, who's liked, who's commented, subscribed, taken part in any way. It means so much to us. This is a unique and new thing, and it is so cool to have you along for the ride. In addition, we're in a new country. Welcome to Cambodia. And with a new country, we're going to implement a couple of new styles, maybe change up the camera work a little bit. We really hope you like it, but either way, let us know in the comments below. But for now, let's get back to the story. Okay, so back to Cambodia. This country is primarily inhabited by the Khmer people. They were once rulers of a great empire based in Angkor. But their golden age was in the 1200s, and that was quite some time ago. Since then, Cambodia has been constantly invaded by Vietnam and Thailand, and in the colonial era, France. And when French colonialism collapsed, America stepped in as part of its war in Vietnam. And the war brought unrest. The revolution came to Cambodia in the form of Viet Minh soldiers, camping in jungles across the border to hide from the French and American bombs. But it was a bit too Vietnam-focused for the nationalist Cambodians. They banded around the leadership of a Paris-educated elite called Sarath Sar, or more commonly known by his pseudonym Pol Pot. It formed the basis for what would eventually be called the Khmer Rouge. They'd started small, just a rebel group in a distant jungle fighting against a beloved king. But everything changed when America began to bomb Cambodia. Without even declaring war, they began bombing the country in force. The United States dropped more explosives on Cambodia than were dropped in the entirety of World War II by all the Allies combined. It was meant to stop communist guerrillas, but it only made more of them. After all, you can imagine what this was doing on the ground. Civilians were being blown out of their homes with their only sources of income destroyed. Tens of thousands were killed indiscriminately. It drove people right into the arms of the Khmer Rouge and thoroughly weakened the central government. And then there was the coup. The king didn't suppress communism loudly enough. He was walking a tightrope, but America was fighting a war. They installed a military dictatorship that hated communists the proper amount. And the king, with nowhere to turn for support, publicly promoted the Khmer Rouge. They promised to reinstate the throne. And this opened the floodgates. The average person joining didn't understand the ins and outs of Pol Pot's doctrine, but they understood loyalty to king and country. As the Vietnam War ends and Saigon falls, Cambodia's dictatorship falls with it. They've been heavily reliant on US money, support, and military to stay in power, and now the US is gone. The Khmer Rouge come out of the forest and replace this military dictatorship with something far more brutal. And they waste absolutely no time in implementing their evil plans. They immediately make the city disappear into the countryside, leave everything behind, give all of your money and items and food over to the Khmer Rouge, and start walking. They kill administrators, soldiers, teachers, anyone they consider elite immediately on the spot and turn everyone else into a countryside peasant within hours. The government decided that education was unnecessary. After all, everything you needed to know in life you could learn working in a rice field. They killed people who wore glasses simply because they seemed elitist. They started to turn all the schools into prisons and work camps, like the infamous S21 here in Phnom Penh. Once a high school, it was quickly turned into the most infamous prison in the Khmer Rouge regime. 99% plus death rates of prisoners. It didn't matter your age, your gender, your creed, your position in the party. If you entered the walls of that prison, you would eventually end up here, in the killing fields just outside town. The Khmer Rouge believed that they were making a perfect society. In their eyes, they would change everything until all people were the same. Not equal, but the same thoughts, the same ideas, the same life, the same experiences. An impossible ideal, but they were willing to kill for it. Loving someone without party permission meant death. And they weren't giving out jobs based on skills or experience because that would imply that people weren't the same. They were giving them out based on loyalty, on who was a member of the party. There was even a 12-year-old who ended up running an entire section of the country, an administrative task that she definitely was not up for. And so you end up immediately with starvation, of course. But once starvation comes in, people aren't allowed to forage for food because foraging implies individuality. It implies that you're not eating the same as everybody else, and therefore you can't be the same. The government literally preferred that their people starve to death than show even the slightest hint of individualism. Soon as the country began to collapse, the party decided to blame spies from within. This is always so common. It's not our fault. It must be saboteurs within the party who are stopping us from achieving these lofty goals. And the only way to get rid of saboteurs is to kill them. They didn't just kill them, though. Because whenever they tortured them, they made them give names. There were no names to give. These were innocent people. They had not done the crime they were being accused of. So what names would they give? They gave the names of people they knew. Maybe they didn't like them, maybe just whoever under torture. It ended up killing families. These prisons would take friends, families, co-workers, anyone you'd associated with, and kill them alongside. And for 3 years straight, around the country in killing fields such as this one, the regime repeated their terrible pattern. It wasn't sympathy from abroad that stopped the Khmer Rouge, but hubris from within. even though their population was starving, their leadership had been purged, and their army was weak, they decided to invade Vietnam. It was the sort of tactical leadership you'd expect from the Khmer Rouge. It was the sort of idea that could only come up if everyone was afraid to say no to you. Vietnam wiped the floor with them. It was barely even a war. Within a few days, they had already taken almost every major city. The Khmer Rouge fled back into the forest, and Vietnam set up a government of its own liking. But the Khmer Rouge weren't dead yet. They'd survived for another roughly 20 years in the jungles, actually keeping some power and putting a lot of pressure on the government to change, to fear them. And it was because they had major powers backing them abroad. People who were so opposed to what was happening with communist Russia, how the Soviets were coming down to Vietnam to impose their style of communism, that they were willing to back the Khmer Rouge despite what they'd done internally, knowing that the genocide had happened. So the Khmer Rouge stay in the jungles until the late 1990s. Not really keen on fighting a rebellion in Cambodia, the Vietnamese try to step back, but they can't let the Khmer Rouge take over again. So they sort of find themselves in limbo up until the 90s, whenever the UN steps in and puts the king back in power, the king from the very beginning. So they've basically reverted 30 years before, as if none of it's ever happened. The Khmer Rouge are still in the jungles, the king is in power, there are external threats constantly deciding the fate of Cambodia, almost as if it's reset. But of course it hasn't reset. This terrible thing has happened. This trauma, this homicide, this genocide of the people is looming over everything. To convince the Khmer Rouge to come out of the forest and disband to become part of normal society again, they make a deal that gives them near amnesty. Despite these leaders having committed a holocaust, a genocide of their people, they go unpunished. To this day, despite UN efforts, not a single one of their leading members has been to prison for their crimes. Some have been on trial, but nothing came of it. So 40 years later, the trauma remains unfinished. There's no catharsis to end this experience. It's just sort of trickled out. And you can see how it affects everything in the modern day. Cambodia is more than just the story of the Khmer Rouge. It is the story of Angkor. It is the story of modern Phnom Penh. It is a story of a bright, friendly nation seemingly worlds away from the struggles of their recent past. It's a country of skyscrapers, smiling faces, and optimism for the future. Yet the legacy remains. The Khmer Rouge era is over. It's gone. But it can't be forgotten. This is Rare Earth.
Cambodia just had a major election, but there wasn't much suspense involved. The outcome, as expected, was declared a win for authoritarian Prime Minister Hun Sen, who has been in power for over 33 years. This was the 6th general election since the UN sponsored the country's free and fair vote in 1993. But some analysts say that the more elections that have been held, the more authoritarian the country has become. Journalists and human rights groups say Cambodia is sliding into a full-fledged dictatorship. And we spoke to an expert on authoritarian regimes and democratization in Southeast Asia, who says the country is already there. Hi guys, I'm Versha. This is Now This World, and on this episode, we're exploring the question, how did Cambodia get here? Before we look at the latest elections, we need to understand who Hun Sen is. The world's longest currently serving prime minister first came to power in 1985, but was a political figure in the country years before that. A series of twists and turns in the Cambodian power structure eventually landed him in the right place at the right time. In the early 70s, a young Hun Sen joined the forces of the communist insurgency movement, the Khmer Rouge, and quickly moved up the ranks to commander, leading hundreds and thousands of men in military offenses against the pro-US Khmer Republic in the years leading up to the Khmer Rouge's takeover of the capital city, Phnom Penh. Cambodia then spent 4 years in the mid-70s, embroiled in the Khmer Rouge regime, whose brutal crackdowns resulted in the deaths of an estimated 2 million people, including hundreds of thousands of mostly Muslim Cham people. This is considered to be one of the worst mass killings of the 20th century. Hun Sen has denied taking part in the human rights abuses committed by the Khmer Rouge. He defected to Vietnam in 1977, allegedly out of fear of retribution from the government for not taking part in the mass killings. Vietnam invaded Cambodia 2 years later, overthrew the Khmer Rouge regime, and instituted a new government, the People's Republic of Kampuchea, or PRK. Hun Sen's connection and perceived loyalty to Vietnam led to his appointment as foreign minister in the PRK, and then, by age 32, prime minister. But under the police state of the communist PRK, human rights abuses continued. Security forces suppressed opposition groups and tortured and interrogated detainees. Lee Morgenbesser, whose research examines flawed elections and dictators in Southeast Asia, broke it down for us.
So you had 4 warring factions, you had outbreak of disease, poverty, starvation, sort of a lot of very terrible conditions.
Eventually, the international community stepped in to oversee a peace agreement with the goal of setting Cambodia on a path to democracy. This led to the 1993 so-called free and fair elections. Those elections didn't turn out so well for Hun Sen. His party, the Cambodian People's Party, or CPP, didn't win the majority of seats, but he refused to accept the result and forced a negotiation with the Fun Sin Pek Party to become second prime minister. In 1997, he orchestrated a coup to consolidate power and has single-handedly ruled as PM ever since. His official title in Khmer translates to Princely Exalted Supreme Great Commander of Gloriously Victorious Troops. And starting in 2016, all media were ordered to use this full title. As it stands, Transparency International ranks Cambodia the 3rd most corrupt country in Asia. But how could a country with constitution-mandated general elections every 5 years be so corrupt? It has a lot to do with who's running in them. Though no fewer than 20 registered parties competed in the recent election, it wasn't really a competition. Hun Sen has denied this, but these parties are known locally as firefly parties for a reason. They pop up briefly during election season, then fade away again. Many of these parties have been accused of ties to the government, or even being completely fabricated. Besides which, they have no time to develop infrastructure to mobilize supporters.
You've got a party that's been in power since 1979, competing against 20 minor parties that have no significance, no influence on the political dynamics of the country. Most of them don't even have a national presence. They promote the idea of competition without the substance of it.
He says the government is still using elections to uphold the facade of democracy, to help Cambodia make a case for foreign aid, foreign direct investment, and membership in international organizations. But Hun Sen's party essentially eliminated the only real opposition in November 2017 and imprisoned or exiled its leaders. Many speculate that the party's surprising success in the 2013 election was the driving force behind this. But even if these firefly parties were well established with adequate resources, the actual process of voting still looks like this.
Widespread irregularities with the elections, such as vote buying and voter intimidation, literally handing out cash, literally teaching people how to tick the box for the Cambodian People's Party.
Even if opposition groups exist, it's difficult for them to speak out without fear of retribution. A recently enacted lèse-majesté law forbids people from insulting the monarchy or risk facing a fine and years of prison time. And pressure from international bodies isn't as strong as it has been historically. Though the White House has recently reduced its financial assistance to Cambodia over concerns about, quote, setbacks to democracy, the current stakes aren't too high for the country.
You have China backing Cambodia and the government and its approach to elections, and you have Donald Trump in the White House, who, quite frankly, does not seem to care about the promotion of democracy and the security of human rights in Southeast Asia.
And in the past year, the crackdown on human rights has escalated. In addition to eliminating the major opposition party, major independent newspapers have been forced to close in order to silence critical reporting. So now that the CPP has taken another victory, what's next for Hun Sen and the country? Hun Sen has committed to staying prime minister for at least another decade, and he's also been grooming his sons to take over when the time comes. But as the younger, more educated generation grows increasingly disillusioned with Hun Sen's authoritarian rule, could a mass protest reasonably overthrow the government? So what do you think? Would a mass protest be big enough to bring down the world's longest currently serving prime minister? Or will Hun Sen cling to power at all costs? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching Now This World, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button.
Two hot topics especially as well. One is a territorial dispute in the South China Sea. The other, tensions on the Korean Peninsula. Both Koreas will be represented in Phnom Penh, from where Steve Chow reports.
If wrestling were politics, then Cambodia's bond with North Korea could be summed up at Phnom Penh's Olympic Training Center. Leading the nation's most promising wrestlers are North Korean coaches. At a time when North Korea is in the grip of international sanctions, Cambodia has embraced the secretive nation, encouraging exchanges of experts.
We two countries have long had a strong relationship, and this is an example of that.
A relationship rooted in history. Cambodia's former king, Norodom Sihanouk, spent long periods of time in North Korea, and is seen here with his good friend, Kim Il-sung. And so, at this summit of world leaders, the question is, can a small Southeast Asian nation bring North Korea to the negotiating table?
The royal family of Cambodia has enjoyed surprisingly close relations with North Korea, so their opinions are likely to be taken seriously in Pyongyang.
Aiming to play peacemaker, Cambodian officials went to Pyongyang last month to try and find a way past April's missile test, conducted by North Korea in defiance of UN sanctions. They say the North is ready to talk, but wants respect.
Don't treat them as a minority. Treat North Korea as an equal footing with the others. Everyone open, eye and ear, widely to learn to hear from them first.
U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is also here in Cambodia, but will likely be wary of re-engaging. An election is looming, and America is still smarting from that April rocket test made after it offered food aid in return for access to the North's nuclear program. Cambodia hopes its closer relationship will give it a greater chance of success. It has allowed North Korea to set up restaurants in its capital. The profits from the unique shows go straight to cash-starved Pyongyang. But North Korea is notoriously unpredictable, and while Cambodia may dream of entering the international diplomatic arena, it's playing a game with the rules.
Cambodia joined ASEAN in April 1999. It has been slated to join earlier, but an invitation to join was revoked after the 1997 coup. Phnom Penh hosted an ASEAN Region Forum meeting attended by the U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell in June 2003. Phnom Penh hosted the 20th ASEAN Summit meeting in April 2012. Cambodia took the rotating chairmanship of ASEAN in 2012. This occasion marked the 10th anniversary of Cambodia chairing ASEAN for the first time in 2002. According to the Cambodian government, Cambodia, as chair of ASEAN, in close cooperation with the support of all members countries, has continued to work on ASEAN's current priorities to push forward a dynamic integration toward realizing the ASEAN community by 2015. Cambodia's admission was a truly historic moment, fulfilling the vision of ASEAN's founding father to unite all nations in Southeast Asia under the ASEAN roof. The realization of ASEAN 10 has not only a symbolic significance but also an immense implication of the cause of the regional unity and solidarity in accordance with the principle of mutual respect, equality, and non-interference in its member countries' internal affairs.
Before, we have supply only around 8 hours a day and a very bad quality of water. The Japanese come with, first of all, a master plan study. The project brings us a very good guideline in order to operate the system. Reducing the water loss means that keeping more water to supply to people.
Now I'm so happy to get the water. I can drink the clean water from the tap, and my family and got healthy with the clean water.
All of this will not be happening if we do not have the assistance from our development partners, especially the Japanese ODA.
Japan have a long history of solving water challenges. So we, Japan, want to share the advanced water filtration technology. Of course, we want to help the other countries to get the clean and safe water.
We take a photo of the two kids who recently received the water. He told me that before, my mother allowed me only to have one shower in 3 days. And now, she forced me to have 3 showers a day. That really make us proud to whatever we serve to people.
By the tone of your voice that this isn't working out. And I can tell by the look in your eyes you've made up your mind, you haven't got a doubt. Breaking me to pieces, and I don't know how I'll deal with this, but if I learned anything at all, it was to always be true to yourself. And I know that this isn't the end of it all. I will fall. Now, have you ever watched the shadows fly across the midnight sky? I always used to watch the sunset, but it seems that I haven't got the time anymore. But if I learned anything at all, it was to always be true to yourself. And I see what I can do, and I'm gonna try.